Chloé Messdaghi present. Gotta catch 'em all, Bug Bounty. Bug Bounty has been a long time craze and becoming a necessity to keeping organization safe by crowd-searching their security. But where does one start unprotected? This talk approach the history of Bug Bounty, the current legal landscape, and how to get started.
Hi. Yeah. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Chloé, and I'm so glad to be here with you guys. It's always been on my bucket list to speak at your conference, and I am so thrilled to have been accepted. And yeah, so today we're going to talk about bug bounty. So let's dive into it, shall we? For those that don't know who I am, my name is Chloé Messdaghi. I am an InfoSec advocate and activist. I tend to fight for rights when it comes to privacy, but also to let the public know when it comes to their security. I am the VP of strategy over at Point Three Security. That is my day job. And when I'm not doing that, I do a lot of other things. I am the co-founder of WOSEC, which is Women of Security. I'm also the president for it as well. I'm the founder of We Are Hackers, also known as Women Hackers back in the day. I also co founded a project called Hacking is Not a Crime. You may have heard of it. And also organizer for the Hacker Book Club, which we meet every week on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And we read a new book every month. And this is usually written by the hacker community, and the hacker community reads it all together. And yes, the author and those mentioned in the book do attend. I'm also a podcaster for ITSP Magazine's The Uncommon Journey with Phil Wiley and Alyssa Miller. And yes, those are my two pups. If you see in the corner there, that is Sherlock and Luna, which are both Shibas, and they act like cats. If you can see, they like to sit on windowsills and also on the couch corners. If you want to learn anything about me, that is my website. Feel free to check it out. Pretty much everything is on there. Also, I am on Instagram and Twitter, and my DMs are always open, so feel free to follow me at Chloé Messdaghi. Now let's dive into the real reason why we're here today. So we're going to dive into the what, the why, and the how of bug bounty, how your brain is gamified by it, and that's why it works so well. Also, the history of bug bounty, safety first, of course. So we have to look into the legal landscape so you are aware. And then for those that are brand new, how to even get started. So we're going to talk about the best tools, and then I'll have Q&A at the end. So let's do this. So first things first, what is bug bounty? So it's basically a transaction between submitting a bug and getting paid. Just very basic information. But why do we need it? Because companies, they need outsider eyes and mindsets to find vulnerabilities. And this is why crowdsourced security has been very helpful in keeping companies and consumers safe. Because we need that. Because you can't always rely on your security team to find vulnerabilities. This gives a place where people can disclose and also to get paid for it. So how does it work exactly? Well, in general, depending how critical the bug is, the amount is paid out higher, but it just needs to stay within scope. And remember, never to exploit, because if you do, you're gonna get suspended. And so that's one of the things to remember is how does it work? You also want to you want to be the first one, right? Because dupes happen, so duplicates, and you want to be the first one to submit it so then you can get the payout. But I want to talk about a little bit of how our brains are stimulated by it so you have a better idea of how gamification works, because bug bounty works on gamification. And it's good to understand how it thrives so much because of that. So, besides dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins being created by gamification, such as bug bounty, our brains are really stimulated by it. And we're going to dive into getting to know your brain a little bit. So, what I want you to focus on is that green part right there of your brain. The green part of your brain is your temporal lobe, which we'll dive into in a second. But the other thing to be aware is the amygdala and hippocampus, which you see on the right, which live within the temporal lobe itself. But gamification in general, it thrives in the temporal lobe more than any other place in your brain. So, what is the temporal lobe? You're probably wondering. It's basically is involved in processing sensory, uh, input into derived meanings for the appropriate retention. And that could be your visual memory, that could be your language comprehension, your emotion association. But this is where gamification thrives. And then that's where also the amygdala and the hippocampus are. And the hippocampus and amygdala is what is the main focus when it comes to gamification. So in general, thing to note about your amygdala, it works as your survival mode, but it's also where your emotions are kept. It's completely subconscious, so anything that occurs in there you are not aware of. The hippocampus is basically, it takes short-term working memories and make it into long-term working memories in your temporal lobe. And it's important to understand is that emotional response is necessary to recall information. This is why when you have a dream, you're more likely to recall a nightmare versus a regular dream because there's emotions tied to it. Anything like as fear, edge of your seat, or even emotion of love, it actually takes over your brain in many ways. And this could also be called as amygdala hijack. It's really important to understand how that works so then you're able to understand how gamification works. So in other words, you have a bug, you want to submit it as soon as possible. And that's the reason because your amygdala is like, hey, timing, you got to be close to the clock. You want to be the first one to submit that bug. That's amygdala. And the hippocampus is basically taking your latest tools that you've learned, new strategies, and putting it into use. So that's how it works on your brain and why it's so important and why it thrives. Bug bounty literally just stimulates this part of your brain, which is all about your memories and your emotion, which makes you human and makes you who you are today. So we know now how our brain loves it, but how did bug bounty actually start? And I want you to think of, how and when did it first start? So think of that. I'll let you sit on it. All right, you ready for this? October 10th, 1995 via Netscape. So Netscape, they'll launch the first ever bug bounty program that we know of by offering a cash rewards to those who were able to find security bugs in their Netscape Navigator 2.0 beta. But it was from that moment that other companies started noticing, hey, this might be a good idea to do. And this is the history of bug bounties. This is a slide that was taken from Katie Maziris. She basically did a history of bug bounty in the timeline, and she got it from BugCrowd for the O'Reilly conference. Now, what I want you to keep an eye on here is that if you saw that 1995 Netscape was like the first one that we know of, and every year suddenly you see other companies following. So now the thing to think about is that prior to 2012, companies ran their own bug bounty programs. And this is a lot of work. If you do not know how it works, you have to have someone who's going to manage. So anytime someone submits a vulnerability, you then send it to the following people and you test them on that. And so to do that, it requires a good number of people to oversee and also to make sure that those that are reporting are not exploiting, they're staying within scope as well. So this takes a lot of energy to do it, but it's also a necessity because companies know that you can rely on your team, your security team all the time. But the thing is that one of them is going to miss something. And that's why bug bounty is important, and having disclosure programs is so important, so then it keeps the company safe and keeps consumers safe. So in 2012 to 2013 is where BugCrowd, HackerOne, and Synax started coming about because they started realizing that these companies were struggling to run their own bug bounty program and that other companies were interested in doing it, but they didn't know how to get started. They were short on resources, short on people for doing it. So then these platforms came around to do it for them. And to this day, as you see, further and further, major companies have now followed. So I want to talk a little bit about the birth of bug bounty programs. Because of Netscape back in the day, it was one of the opening moments for them having to have some sort of bug bounty program in place to keep them secure and whatnot. The birth of bug bounty platforms are important to understand because without bug bounty platforms that we know today, we wouldn't be where we are as the hacker community. Bug bounty gave basically a place for, like, platforms, that is. It gave a place for the government to suddenly be like, hey, why don't we just do this program called Hack the Pentagon or Hack the Army, Hack the Navy? And suddenly government started getting involved a lot more. And the thing is that there is some sort of trickle down effect that when the government starts trusting the hacker community to disclose, then big time companies tend to follow. And so that's one of the things is that when companies see government trust a community, then it changes their perceptions of hackers. And so bug bounty programs are really important because they have made our community in some ways having an open door to legislation, also to push for rights for hackers because companies and governments are relying on them too now. But the one problem I want to mention to you guys is that even though that is the case, we're still dealing with the 94% of the Forbes Global 2000 do not have a vulnerability disclosure program in place. And that's the saddest thing, because the reason for that is that they are afraid of the hacker community, which is unfortunate in many ways. And because of that, we have dealt with a bunch of pushbacks and also leads us into some serious legal situations, which I want to talk about. Now, I just want to let you guys know once again is that I am not an attorney, but please keep this in mind. Now, you probably remember the Equifax breach in general, but did you know that it was a hacker who warned Equifax about 5 to 6 months before it was announced that they had this massive breach? They didn't even follow up on patching it until it made headlines. And we see this often play when security researchers or hackers, they go out and they disclose something and they're either misinterpreted or it's seen as just someone to ignore because they don't understand how disclosure works is one of the things, but also because the stereotypes of hackers as criminals or devious persons. And this puts us in a situation, once again, for legal situations. Another one is Capital One. If you remembered, this breach took place in stages across March and April of 2019, but Capital One only became aware of the problem on July 17th when the researcher tipped the company to a public GitHub page that was displaying something that looked an awful like private Capital One data. And once again, it's one of those things that we need to have disclosure programs in place. We need it. Every company should have a VDP or a coordinated vulnerability disclosure program. Everyone should have that at this point, because what ends up happening is that we tend to let them know on social media. We GM them on Twitter, or sometimes it takes hours to find the person to contact, days when it's already risky as it is to report something. But I want to talk to you, besides VDP programs, sometimes you have to be worried about bug bounty programs. Because the reality is that we're still not reporting things, but bug bounty programs does open that communication channel to do so. But the one thing to keep in mind is that 60% of security researchers do not report vulnerabilities to this day. And that 1 out of 4, if they don't have a VDP program in place, they won't report it either. So something to keep in mind is that the fear of prosecution still lingers with us even when we're participating in bug bounty. Even if we stay within scope and we don't exploit, we're still in concerns. But like I said, we need it. So why are they so scared? Besides prosecution, looking for contact information and reading policies have been such a burden to reporting vulnerabilities, is that we still have cases like this. Even when you stay within scope and you don't exploit, you can still face some legal ramification. And this is why it's really important, is that when it comes to bug bounty, I highly recommend going with one of the platforms, the main ones, because it helps these type of situations from not occurring. So this is a really good case to note of with DJI, the drone manufacturer. But basically, they launched a bug bounty program of their own. So they're not running on any platforms like BugCrowd and HackerOne or Synact. They decided to do their own. They didn't do probably enough research, clearly, from this case. But anyway, 2 researchers, Sean and Kevin, they came across the bug bounty program, which covered all security issues in firmware, application and servers, including source code leak and secure workaround and privacy issues. And they basically they wanted to reconfirm the scope. So Kevin sent an email to that DJI reconfirming the scope, and it took him 2 weeks to respond. So that's already letting you know that they didn't have enough program management set for their bug bounty program because of the 2 week of just saying, yes, that is true. That is our scope. In other words, they were really at the beginning here. So anyway, he did report a vulnerability with his friend. And what happened was that they turned around and wanted to award him with $30,000. He walked away from it because it offered no legal protection for himself. And in return of that, the company basically decided that this person might be a threat. So they decided to charge him with basically breaking the CFA, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which is a huge problem because basically they claimed that he went out of scope, even though he did double check everything. And in return, he didn't know what to do. So what he did was that he took all the internal conversations that he had with them, put it together, put on a blog post about why he walked away from this $30,000, but also what happened to him with DJI. DJI then actually pulled out of the lawsuit itself. So that's letting you know, once again, that even if you are participating in a VDP or a bug bounty program, you still need to keep a paper trail and you need to protect yourself. And this is why I always say, if you're going to do bug bounty or a VDP or whatnot, you just do it with one of the main 3 platforms just to stay safe. Because overall, what we're still dealing with today is that the laws prevent good hacking the same way that they prevent bad hacking, and we need good hacking more than ever before, especially with COVID-19. We have seen a huge increase of breaches that have been happening, and we need people to disclose vulnerabilities. What I want to talk to you guys now is just to note that everywhere around the world, you can find that there's anti-hacking laws, anti-circumvention laws, and acceptable use policy. But what I want you to understand is that the CFA, so remember the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, is something that you need to know about. Because if you are a hacker, this law impacts you. And now to note about that is that even though it is a US legislation, you need to also understand that other countries followed the US because of that. And so once we have changes to CFA here, we're hoping that it brings changes elsewhere too. But the thing you need to know about is that the Computer Fraud Abuse Act is a cybersecurity bill in the US that was enacted in 1984, okay? As an amendment to existing computer fraud law, which had been included in the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. This law prohibits accessing a computer without authorization or in excess of authorization. It is also to be used when a researcher tends to go out of scope, but also it's used to prosecute hacking like we saw with the DJI case. But the thing you need to understand that the CFA was written because Ronald Reagan watched this movie called War Games. And when he watched War Games, he freaked out about hackers and saw them as these devious individuals like the media always portrays for us, unfortunately. And basically, he was like, we have to do something about it. And that's how the CFA was created, because out of fear. Now, one thing to understand is that there was no representation of the hacker community when this was created. And there still has not been a discussion of updating the CFAA. There has been here and there, but it never goes past that, which is definitely needed right now more than ever before. But the thing you should know about the CFAA is that it's not usually used against hackers since 2013 because the DOJ, they've been doing whatever they can to try to protect ethical hackers. However, this law itself has been used against hackers when it comes to companies wanting to prosecute and local government. And that means like your local and state. The anti-circumvention laws, these are known as Copyright Act laws, and basically it's the right to repair, seeing reverse engineering as a breach of property. Now, we haven't had any cases in the US of hackers dealing with DMCA. It's always been CFA, but it does provide a chilling effect, so you should know about it. Now, acceptable use policy, how many of you guys actually have read your terms and conditions for products? Yeah, I tried with an Apple product and it was like 50 pages, and I'm not an attorney, and that just seemed like a bunch of jargon. And even though English is my first language, it was a lot. So I kind of gave up on it. But the thing is that is an issue too, because we're hackers all around the world trying to disclose something, and we might not say the right phrase and we could get in trouble. And so that's one of those things we need to be aware of, is that until there's better guidance on acceptable use policy, we also have to be careful about the language that we use when disclosing. But overall, community consensus does agree that it is a must to have. Government, companies, organizations in general, we all need bug bounty. We need disclosure programs, because if we don't have that, it puts us all at a risk and it keeps consumers being at risk. So that's why it's really important is to work together and to try to reduce the fear that we have of each other. Because program matchers, they're asking to be hacked, but not hacked badly, but how to conduct and handle situations when hackers reporting something is something that they're still working with to this day. And I know this is a very scary subject because there's many of you guys that already do bug bounty or are interested in it, but it's really important to know your rights and to also know what is the current landscape for you before you participate. So then you are well aware of paper trails are a must, but also knowing that language plays a huge role too. And yes, there's a picture of a cat because, I know there's some cat lovers out there. But the good news is to know that companies are starting to look into VDP. So that Forbes 2000 list, they are looking into it because they know they need to have one, because it does prevent breaches from occurring. It also keeps them safe, but also because they are aware that, maybe their team doesn't have a diverse background, and because of that, they're not catching the things that diverse eyes could. And so that's one of the reasons why it works so well to basically be able to ask the public to help out. But once again, it's really, really important is that they also need to improve their legal language so everyone can understand it. So it doesn't have to be an attorney to understand things. So now you have the background, and now you're probably wondering, how do I get started? So now you know, keep a paper trail, stay with the 3 major bug bounty platforms, because that's going to give you extra protection, but it's very important for you to stay within scope. If you are wondering if this would be in scope or out of scope, confirm with them just to be on the safe side, protect yourself. And once again, do not ever exploit. If you exploit, you are making the situation so much worse for so many hackers around the world, because there's a very fine line of trust between an organization and a hacker. And the bug bounty platforms themselves have been that middleman to allow them to have communication across each other in the safest way possible when disclosing and getting paid or not getting paid out. So the first things first, if you want to get into bug bounty, you need to know Burp Suite. I know Google is your best friend for searching any question that you may have, but Burp Suite is the tool that you must know. So download the community one. It's free. You don't have to get the expensive one. You don't have to buy the paid one. I mean, just get to know it very well, ins and outs, and I'll show where you can do that. But Portsmouth Academy is a really good place to start to understand this tool and all the wonderful things that it can do. The second step is ready and study. You need to read. It's so important. You do not need to have the Web Application Hackers Handbook, Volume 2 or 2nd edition. It is old. It is out of date a bit, but it's a really cool relic to have on your bookshelf because it is kind of like your security Bible. But the books I do recommend usually is from Peter Yaroski. He wrote Web Hacking 101, which is pretty good. Also, he came out recently, The Real World Bug Hunting, I think about a year ago. So these are both really good books to know. I recommend that. Now, if you want to read up on the Web Application Hackers Handbook 2nd edition, just go to Portsmouth Academy because it's more up to date. So once again, besides reading and Burp Suite, you gotta know it. Good ways to start that process is Portsmouth Academy. Once again, Buckhardt University has some really good curriculum that you can check out and to understand all the different elements that bug bounty plays, but also lays tools and resources. Hacker 1 101 is another one. They have a syllabus. If you see over on the right side, basically letting you know what are things that you should learn. And here's the layout. Here are the different modules that you can participate in. And they also have a CTF too for you to be part of. The fourth step is just doing it. Sign up on HackerOne and Bugcrowd or Synac if you want. But usually all of us in Bug Bounty, we are on both platforms, HackerOne and Bugcrowd. It's just kind of the thing that we do. You can support and check out companies that also care about hacker rights. So there's this website called disclose.io, which is a crowdsourced website which shares details of who to contact, like contact information when disclosing, also to know what other policies are as well, but also what to expect when it comes to if there is any reward. And this is really good because I know that some of us have spent hours, days, and weeks to look for contact information, but it's a really good website to go to so you can have a better understanding what companies are supporting hacker rights. And that's what's really important is that if you're going into Bug Bounty, I highly recommend doing the ones that already care about hackers because they've already worked with hackers, they have respect for hackers, and you have less of a concern to worry about. Just remember, don't go out of scope and don't exploit. And lastly, here are the overviews of the steps. So sign up on HackerOne or Bugcrowd, download the Burp Suite community, know your rights and what companies are supporting ethical hackers. Once again, check out disclose.io. It's a great place to see what companies are there that support the community. But now you know the basics of your rights, which is good to know, is to keep a paper trail, don't go out of scope. And if you have questions about whether or not something is in scope, message to find out if it is before you do anything. Also, study and read the books from Peter Yaroski is really important. Also, check out educational platforms such as HackerOne 101, Bugcrowd University, and Putzberger Academy. Last but not least, you see there that there's an ethical rights petition. It's really important that this is for the hacker community to sign and share. And you don't have to be a hacker to sign it, but you have to be someone who agrees that the hacker community has rights and should have rights. And that's what that petition is about. So if you can, please sign it and share it with your friends and family. The more people, the merrier. Also check out hackingisnotacrime.org, which is your one-place shop of all the organizations that are supporting hacker rights. But also it's a place where you can find advocacy and actions that you can take to try to change the situation that hackers are in at this moment. Anyway, I just want to say thank you guys so much for existing and thank you for having me present. I just hope everyone's staying safe, wear a mask. It's really important because it keeps everyone else safe. And while we're going through this surreal, unprecedented time, and just be there and be kind to one another. So thank you guys so much for existing. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me. Also, I am on Instagram and Twitter, so my DMs are always open. If there's anything else you want to know or reach out about, you now know how to get a hold of me. And thanks, you guys, and I hope you enjoyed that session.